Letter 13 of Letters from America by Rupert Brooke. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Letter 13, The Rockies. At Calgary, if you can spare a minute from more important matters, slip beyond the hurrying white city, climb the golf links, and gaze west. A low bank of dark clouds disturbs you by the fixity of its outline. It is the Rockies, 70 miles away. On a good day, it is said, they are visible twice as far, so clear and serene is the air. 500 miles west is the coast of British Columbia, a region with a different climate, different country, and different problems. It is cut off from the prairies by vast tracts of wild country and uninhabitable ranges. For nearly 200 miles the train pants through the homeless grandeur of the Rockies and the Selkirks. 4 or 5 hotels, a few huts or tents, and a rare mining camp — that is all the habitation in many thousands of square miles. Little even of that is visible from the train. That is one of the chief differences between the effect of the Rockies and that of the Alps. There you are always in sight of a civilization which has nestled for ages at the feet of those high places. They stand, enrobed with worship, and grander by contrast with the lives of men. These unmemoried heights are inhuman, or rather irrelevant to humanity. No recorded Hannibal has struggled across them. Their shadow lies on no remembered literature. They acknowledge claims neither of the soul nor of the body of man. He is a stranger, neither nature's enemy nor her child. She is there alone, scarcely a unity in the heaped confusion of these crags, almost without grandeur among the chaos of earth. Yet this horrid and solitary wilderness is but one aspect. There is beauty here, at length, for the first time in Canada, the real beauty that is always too sudden for mortal eye and brings pain with its comforts. The Rockies have a remoter yet a kindlier beauty than the Alps. The rock is of a browner color, and such rugged peaks and crowns as do not attain snow continually suggest gigantic castellations, or the ramparts of Titans. Eastward the foothills are few and low, and the mountains stand superbly. The heart lifts to see them. They guard the sunset. Into this rocky wilderness you plunge, and toil through it hour by hour, viewing it from the rear of the observation car. The observation car is a great invention of the New World. At the end of the train is a compartment with large windows, and a little platform behind it, roofed over, but exposed otherwise to the air. On this platform are 16 little perches, for which you fight with Americans. Victorious, you crouch on one and watch the ever-receding panorama behind the train. It is an admirable way of viewing scenery. But a day of being perpetually drawn backwards at a great pace through some of the grandest mountains in the world has a queer effect. Like life, it leaves you with a dizzy irritation. For as in life, you never see the glories till they are past, and then they vanish with incredible rapidity, and if you crane to see the dwindling further peaks, you miss the new splendors. The day I went through most of the Rockies was, by some standards, a bad one for the view. Rain scudded by in forlorn gray showers, and the upper parts of the mountains were wrapped in cloud, which was but rarely blown aside to reveal the heights. Sublimity, therefore, was left to the imagination, but desolation was most vividly present. In no weather could the impression of loneliness be stronger. The pines drooped and sobbed. Cascades, born somewhere in the dun firmament above, dropped down the mountain sides in ever-growing white threads. The rivers roared and plunged with aimless passion down the ravines. Stray little clouds, left behind when the rack lifted a little, ran bleating up and down the forlorn hillsides. More often the clouds trailed along the valleys, a long procession of shrouded, melancholy figures, seeming to pause as with an indeterminate, tragic, vain gesture before passing out of sight up some ravine. Yet desolation is not the final impression that will remain of the Rockies and the Selkirks. I was advised by various people to stop off at Banff and at Lake Louise in the Rockies. I did so. They are supposed to be equally the beauty spots of the mountains. How perplexing it is that advisers are always so kindly and willing to help, and always so undiscriminating. It is equally disastrous to be a skeptic and to be credulous. Banff is an ordinary little tourist resort in mountainous country, with hills and a stream and snow peaks beyond. Beautiful enough and invigorating. But Lake Louise is of another world. Imagine a little round lake 6,000 feet up, a mile across, closed in by great cliffs of brown rock, round the shoulders of which are thrown mantles of close, dark pine. At one end the lake is fed by a vast glacier and its milky, tumbling stream, and the glacier climbs to snowfields of one of the highest and loveliest peaks in the Rockies, which keeps perpetual guard over the scene. To this place you go up 3 or 4 miles from the railway. There is the hotel at one end of the lake, facing the glacier; else no sign of humanity. From the windows you may watch the water and the peaks all day, and never see the same view twice. In the lake, ever changing, is Beauty herself, as nearly visible to mortal eye as she may ever be. The water, beyond the flowers, is green, always a different green. Sometimes it is tranquil, glassy, shot with blue, of a peacock tint. Then a little wind awakes in the distance and ruffles the surface yard by yard, covering it with a myriad tiny wrinkles, till half the lake is milky emerald, while the rest still sleeps. And at length the whole is astir, and the sun catches it, and Lake Louise is a web of laughter, the opal distillation of all the buds of all the spring. On either side go up the dark processional pines, mounting to the sacred peaks, devout, kneeling, motionless, in an ecstasy of homely adoration, like the donors and their families in a Flemish picture. Among these you may wander for hours by little rambling paths over white and red and golden flowers, and continually you spy little lakes, hidden away, each a shy, soft jewel of a new, strange tint of green or blue, mutable and lovely. And beyond all is the glacier and the vast fields and peaks of eternal snow. If you watch the great white cliff from the foot of which the glacier flows, 7 miles away, but it seems 2, you will sometimes see a little puff of silvery smoke go up, thin, and vanish. A few seconds later comes the roar of terrific, distant thunder. The mountains tower and smile unregarding in the sun. It was an avalanche. And if you climb any of the ridges or peaks around, there are discovered other valleys and heights and ranges, wild and desert, stretching endlessly away. As day draws to an end, the shadows on the snow turn bluer, the crying of innumerable waters hushes, and the immense, bare rampart of westward-facing rock that guard the great valley win a rich, golden-brown radiance. Long after the sun has set, they seem to give forth the splendor of the day, and the tranquillity of their centuries in undiminished fullness. They have that other-worldly serenity which a perfect old age possesses. And as with a perfect old age, so here the color and the light ebb so gradually out of things that you would swear nothing of the radiance and glory gone up to the very moment before the dark. It is on such a height, and at some such hour as this, that I sat and considered the nature of the country in this continent. There was perceptible even here, though less urgent than elsewhere, the strangeness I had noticed in woods by the St Lawrence, and on the banks of the Delaware, where are red-haired girls who sing at dawn, and in British Columbia, and afterwards among the brown hills and colossal trees of California, but especially by that lonely golden beach in Manitoba, where the high-stepping little brown deer run down to drink, and the wild geese through the evenings go flying and crying. It is an empty land. To love the country here mountains are worshipped, not loved, is like embracing a wraith. A European can find nothing to satisfy the hunger of his heart. The air is too thin to breathe. He requires haunted woods and the friendly presence of ghosts. The immaterial soil of England is heavy and fertile with the decaying stuff of past seasons and generations. Here is the floor of a new wood, yet unencumbered by one year's autumn fall. We Europeans find the Orient stale and too luxuriantly fetid by reason of the multitude of bygone lives and thoughts oppressively with the crowded presence of the dead, both men and gods. So I imagine a Canadian would feel our woods and fields heavy with the past and the invisible, and suffer claustrophobia in an English countryside beneath the dreadful pressure of immortals. For his own forests and wild places are wind-swept and empty. That is their charm and their terror. You may lie awake all night and never feel the passing of evil presences, nor hear printless feet. Neither do you lapse into slumber with the comfortable consciousness of those friendly watchers who sit invisibly by a lonely sleeper under an English sky. Even an Irishman would not see a row of little men with green caps leaping along beneath the fireweed and the golden daisies. Nor have the subtler fairies of England found these wiles. It has never paid a steamship or railway company to arrange for their emigration. In the bush of certain islands of the South Seas you may hear a crashing on windless noons, and looking up see a corpse swinging along head downwards at a great speed from tree to tree, holding by its toes, grimacing, dripping with decay. Americans, so active in this life, rest quiet afterwards; and though every stone of Wall Street have its separate lar, their kind have not gone out beyond city lots. The maple and the birch conceal no dryads, and Pan has never been heard among these reed beds. Look as long as you like along a cataract of the New World, you shall not see a white arm in the foam. A godless place. And the dead do not return. That is why there is nothing lurking in the heart of the shadows, and no human mystery in the colors, and neither the same joy nor the kind of peace at dawn and sunset that older lands know. It is indeed a new world. How far away seem those grassy, moonlit places in England that have been Roman camps or roads, where there is always serenity, and the spirit of a purpose at rest, and the sunlight flashes upon more than flint. Here one is perpetually a first comer. The land is virginal, the wind cleaner than elsewhere, and every lake new born, and each day is the first day. The flowers are less conscious than English flowers. The breezes have nothing to remember and everything to promise. There walk as yet no ghosts of lovers in Canadian lanes. This is the essence of the gray freshness and brisk melancholy of this land; and for all the charm of those qualities, it is also the secret of a European's discontent. For it is possible, at a pinch, to do without gods, but one misses the dead. End of Letter 13. Letter 14 of Letters from America by Rupert Brooke. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Letter 14. Some Niggers. Look at those niggers. Whose are they? An American suffragist lady on board S.S. Ventura, entering Pago Pago Harbor, Samoa, October, 1913, apropos of the Samoans. I suppose that if news came that the National Gallery was burnt down, one might feel, while hearing of the general damage, the rooms gutted or untouched, the Rembrandts and Titians saved, harmed or lost, a sudden disproportionately keen little stab of wonder. The Pisanello St. Hubert, or the Patinir flight into Egypt, what's happened to that? So now there must be a handful of wanderers here and there who, among all the major conflagration and disasters of nations and continents, have felt the tug of the question, what of Samoa? The South Sea Islands have an invincible glamour. Any bar in Frisco or Sydney will give you tales of seamen who slipped ashore in Samoa or Tahiti or the Marquesas for a month's holiday 5, 10, or 20 years ago. Their wives and families await them yet. They are compound, these islands, of all legendary heavens. They are Calypso's and Prospero's Isle, and the Hesperides and Paradise, and every timeless and untroubled spot. Such tales have been made of them by men who have been there and gone away, and have been haunted by the smell of the bush and the lagoons, and faint thunder on the distant reef, and the colors of sky and sea and coral, and the beauty and grace of the islanders. And the queer thing is that it's all, almost tiresomely, true. In the South Seas the Creator seems to have laid himself out to show what he can do. Imagine an island with the most perfect climate in the world, tropical, yet almost always cooled by a breeze from the sea; no malaria or other fevers, no dangerous beasts, snakes, or insects; fish for the catching and fruits for the plucking; and an earth and sky and sea of immortal loveliness. What more could civilization give? Umbrellas? Rope? Gladstone bags? Any one of the vast leaves of the banana is more waterproof than the most expensive woven stuff; and from the first tree you can tear off a long strip of fiber that holds better than any rope; and 30 seconds' work on a great palm leaf produces a basket bag which will carry incredible weights all day and can be thrown away in the evening. A world of conveniences! And the things which civilization has left behind or missed by the way are there, too, among the Polynesians: beauty and courtesy and mirth. I think there is no gift of mind or body that the wise value which these people lack. A man I met in some other islands, who had traveled much all over the world, said to me, "I have found no man, in or out of Europe, with the good manners and dignity of the Samoans, with the possible exception of the Irish peasant." A people among whom an Italian would be uncouth, and a high caste Hindu vulgar, and Karsavina would seem clumsy, and Helen of Troy a frump. The white population of Heaven, as one would expect, is very small; but, as one wouldn't expect, it is composed of Americans, English, and Germans. About half Germans, for it has been a German colony for some 14 years. But it is one of the few white possessions, I suppose, where a decent white needn't feel ashamed of himself; for though it's proper to deny that Germans can colonize, they have certainly ruled Samoa very well. In some part, no doubt, the luck has been with them, with the world, in this success. Samoa was one of their later and wiser attempts in colonizing. The first governor was Herr Solf, the present Secretary of the Colonies, who is reputed to have started the administration of Samoa after a careful examination of our method of ruling Fiji, and with a due but not complete regard for the advice of the chief English and American settlers in Samoa. Certainly he started it very ably and wisely. By luck and good management those various forces which might destroy the beauty of Samoa are almost ineffectual. The fact that the missionaries are nearly all English puts a slight sufficient chasm between the spiritual and civil powers, and avoids that worst peril of these places, hierocracy. The trade of the islands is largely a monopoly of the German firm, a big affair which pays a few people in Hamburg fabulous percentages. So smaller traders aren't encouraged to flourish unduly, and the German firm itself is too well fed to bother about extending. The Samoans, therefore, aren't exploited, spiritually or commercially, as much as they might be. By such slight chances beauty keeps a foothold in the world. The missionary's peace of mind may require that the Samoan should wear trousers, or the trader's pocket that he should drink gin and live under corrugated iron. But the government has discovered that these things are not good for the health of the Polynesian. So the Samoan wears his lava lava, and drinks his kava, and lives in his cool and lovely thatched hut, and is happy. And, final test of administration, the population is no longer decreasing. But I think there's more than luck or German wisdom at the bottom of the happy condition of Samoa. Something in the very magic of the place seems to subdue or soften the evil in men. Heaven forbid I should deny that mean and treacherous and cruel acts of white men and brown are on record, but as a rule the greedy or the boorish, once they settle here, appear to mellow and grow quiet. Between this sea and sky even a trader becomes almost a gentleman, even a Prussian almost lovable, and the very missionaries are betrayed by beauty, and contentment takes them unaware. Samoa has been well governed. The people have been forbidden a few perils of civilization, and for the rest are left pretty well to themselves. Go up from Apia across the mountains or round the coasts, or take a boat over to the other big island, Savai, and you find them living their old life, fishing and bathing and singing, and never a sign of a white man. They are guaranteed possession of their land. They'll sometimes complain faintly of taxation, a small head tax the government exacts, which compels the individual to some 4 or 5 days' work a year. The English inhabitants themselves have had no grumble against the Germans, except that they incline to be too kind to the natives, an admirable testimonial. And traders in the Pacific say they always get far better treatment from the customs and harbor authorities at Apia than at the British Suva in Fiji. And yet the Samoans do not like the Germans. When I was there nearly a year ago, I was often asked, when will Peritania (Britain) fight Germany and send her away from Samoa? They have no complaint against the Germans. They have merely a sentimental and highly flattering preference for the English. On a recent visit of an English gunboat to Apia, the officers were entertained at a Samoan dinner party, with music and dances, by an eminent and very charming young princess. The princess is a famous beauty, with the keen intelligence Samoans have if they care, a wonderful dancer, possessed of a glorious singing voice, and a perfect knowledge of English. The party was a great success. The princess led her guests afterwards to the flagstaff. Before any one could stop her, she leapt on to the pole and raced up the 60 feet of it. That also is among the accomplishments of a Samoan princess. She seized the German flag, tore it to pieces, brought it down, and danced on it. So the tale is, and it is probably true. In the villages where I stayed it was amusing how swiftly and completely the children forgot the few words of German the government sometimes had them taught. While 1 or 2 common phrases, morgen, gut, etc., were retained as extremely good jokes by the boys and girls, occasions of inextinguishable laughter through the absurdity of their sound and the very ridiculous Germanness of them. I wish I were there again. It is a country and a life that bind the heart. There is a poem. I know an island, lovely and lost and half the world away, and there 'twixt lowland and highland lies a pool, rich with murmur and scent and glimmer, and there my friends go all the radiant day, each golden-limbed and flower-crowned laughing swimmer. And so on. It tells how ugly and joyless by comparison the fellow's own country sometimes seems, filled with money-making and fogs and such gray things. Evil and gloom and cold o' nights in my land, but I know an island where beauty and courtesy as flowers blow. So it goes, with a jolly return on the rhyme. But the whole poem is a bad one. Still, the man felt it, the magic. It is a magic of a different way of life. In the South Seas, if you live the South Sea life, the intellect soon lapses into quiescence. The body becomes more active, the senses and perceptions more lordly and acute. It is a life of swimming and climbing and resting after exertion. The skin seems to grow more sensitive to light and air, and the feel of water and the earth and leaves. Hour after hour one may float in the warm lagoons, conscious in the whole body of every shred and current of the multitudinous water, or diving under in a vain attempt to catch the radiant butterfly-colored fish that flit in and out of the thousand windows of their gorgeous coral palaces, or go up, one of a singing, flower-garlanded crowd, to a shaded pool of a river in the bush, cool from the mountains. The blossom-hung darkness is streaked with the bodies that fling themselves, head or feet first, from the cliffs around the water, and the haunted forest silence is broken by laughter. It is part of the charm of these people that, while they are not so foolish as to think their intelligence is incredibly lively and subtle, their sense of humor and their intuitions of other people's feelings are very keen and living. They have built up, in the long centuries of their civilization, a delicate and noble complexity of behavior and of personal relationships. A white man living with them soon feels his mind as deplorably dull as his skin is pale and unhealthy among those glorious golden brown bodies. But even he soon learns to be his body, and so his true mind, instead of using it as a stupid convenience for his personality, a moment's umbrella against this world. He is perpetually and intensely aware of the subtleties of taste in food, of every tint and line of the incomparable glories of those dawns and evenings, of each shade of intercourse in fishing or swimming or dancing with the best companions in the world. That alone is life. All else is death. And after dark, the black palms against a tropic night, the smell of the wind, the tangible moonlight like a white, dry, translucent mist, the lights in the huts, the murmur and laughter of passing figures, the passionate, queer thrill of the rhythm of some hidden dance, all this will seem to him inexplicably and almost unbearably a scene his heart has known long ago and forgotten, and yet always looked for. And now Samoa is ours. A New Zealand expeditionary force took it. Well, I know a princess who will have had the day of her life. Did they see Stevenson's tomb gleaming high up on the hill as they made for that passage in the reef? Did Vasa with his heavy-lidded eyes and that infinitely adorable Lady Fafaya wander down to the beach to watch them land? They must have landed from boats, and at noon, I see. How hot they got! I know that Apia noon. Didn't they rush to the Tivoli bar? But I forget, New Zealanders are teetotalers. So perhaps the Samoans gave them the coolest of all drinks, kava, and they scored. And what dances in their honor that night! But again, I'm afraid the hula-hula would shock a New Zealander. I suppose they left a garrison and went away. I can very vividly see them steaming out in the evening, and the crowd on shore would be singing them that sweetest and best known of South Sea songs, which begins, "Good-bye, my Flinny," friend you'd pronounce it, and goes on in Samoan, a very beautiful tongue. I hope they'll rule Samoa well. End of Letter 14. End essay of Letters from America by Rupert Brooke. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. End essay, An Unusual Young Man. Some say the declaration of war threw us into a primitive abyss of hatred and the lust for blood. Others declare that we behaved very well. I do not know. I only know the thoughts that flowed through the mind of a friend of mine when he heard the news. My friend (I shall make no endeavor to excuse him) is a normal, even ordinary man, wholly English, 24 years old, active and given to music. By a chance he was ignorant of the events of the world during the last days of July. He was camping with some friends in a remote part of Cornwall, and had gone on with a companion for a 4-days' sail. So it wasn't till they beached her again that they heard. A youth ran down to them with a telegram. We're at war with Germany. We've joined France and Russia." My friend ate and drank, and then climbed a hill of gorse and sat alone, looking at the sea. His mind was full of confused images and the sense of strain. In answer to the word Germany, a train of vague thoughts dragged across his brain: the pompous middle-class vulgarity of the building of Berlin, the wide and restful beauty of Munich, the taste of beer, innumerable quiet glittering cafés, the Ring, the swish of evening air in the face as one skis down past the pines, a certain angle of the eyes in the face, long nights of drinking and singing and laughter, the admirable beauty of German wives and mothers, certain friends, some tunes, the quiet length of evening over the Starnberger See. Between him and the Cornish sea he saw quite clearly an April morning on a lake south of Berlin, the gray water slipping past his little boat, and a peasant woman suddenly revealed against apple blossoms, hanging up blue and scarlet garments to dry in the sun. Children played about her, and she sang as she worked. And he remembered a night in Munich spent with a students' Kneipe. From 8 to 1 they had continually emptied immense jugs of beer, and smoked and sung English and German songs in profound chorus. And when the party broke up he found himself arm in arm with the President, who was a vast Jew, and with an Apollonian youth called Leo Deringer, who said he was a poet. There was also a fourth man of whom he could remember no detail. Together, walking with ferocious care down the middle of the street, they had swayed through Schwabing, seeking an open café. Café Benz was closed, but further up there was a little place still lighted, inhabited by one waiter, innumerable chairs and tables piled on each other for the night, and a row of chessboards in front of which sat a little bald, bearded man in dress clothes, waiting. The little man seemed to them infinitely pathetic. 4 against 1 they played him at chess and were beaten. They bowed and passed into the night. Leo Deringer recited a sonnet, and slept suddenly at the foot of a lamp-post. The Jew's heavy-lidded eyes shone with a final flicker of caution, and he turned homeward resolutely, to the last not wholly drunk. My friend had wandered to his lodgings in an infinite peace. He could not remember what had happened to the fourth man. 1,000 little figures tumbled through his mind, but they no longer brought with them that air of comfortable kindliness which Germany had always signified for him. Something in him kept urging, "You must hate these things, find evil in them." There was that half-conscious agony of breaking a mental habit, painting out a mass of associations, which he had felt in ceasing to believe in a religion, or more acutely after quarreling with a friend. He knew that was absurd. The picture came to him of encountering the Jew, or Deringer, or old Wolf, or little Streckmann, the pianist, in a raid on the East Coast, or on the Continent, slashing at them in a stagey, dim-imagined battle. Ridiculous! He vaguely imagined a series of heroic feats, vast enterprise, and the applause of crowds. From that egotism he was awakened to a different one by the thought that this day meant war, and the change of all things he knew. He realized with increasing resentment that music would be neglected, and he wouldn't be able, for example, to camp out. He might have to volunteer for military training and service. Some of his friends would be killed. The Russian ballet wouldn't return. His own relationship with a girl he intermittently adored, would be changed. Absurd but inevitable, because, he scarcely worded it to himself, he and she and everyone else were going to be different. His mind fluttered irascibly to escape from this thought, but still came back to it like a tethered bird. Then he became calmer, and wandered out for a time into fantasy. A cloud over the sun woke him to consciousness of his own thoughts, and he found with perplexity that they were continually recurring to 2 periods of his life, the days after the death of his mother, and the time of his first deep estrangement from one he loved. After a bit he understood this. Now, as then, his mind had been completely divided into two parts, the upper running about aimlessly from one half-relevant thought to another, the lower unconscious, half laboring with some profound and unknowable change. This feeling of ignorant helplessness linked him with those past crises. His consciousness was like the light scurry of waves at full tide when the deeper waters are pausing and gathering and turning home. Something was growing in his heart, and he couldn't tell what. But as he thought England and Germany, the word England seemed to flash like a line of foam. With a sudden tightening of his heart, he realized that there might be a raid on the English coast. He didn't imagine any possibility of it succeeding, but only of enemies and warfare on English soil. The idea sickened him. He was immensely surprised to perceive that the actual earth of England held for him a quality which he found in and in a friend's honor, and scarcely anywhere else, a quality which, if he'd ever been sentimental enough to use the word, he'd have called holiness. His astonishment grew as the full flood of England swept him on from thought to thought. He felt the triumphant helplessness of a lover. Gray, uneven little fields and small, ancient hedges rushed before him, wild flowers, elms and beeches, gentleness, sedate houses of red brick, proudly unassuming, a countryside of rambling hills and friendly copses. He seemed to be raised high, looking down on a landscape compounded of the western view from the Cotswolds and the Weald, and the high land in Wiltshire, and the Midlands seen from the hills above Prince's Risborough. And all this to the accompaniment of tunes heard long ago, an intolerable number of them being hymns. There was in his mind a confused multitude of faces, to most of which he could not put a name. At one moment he was on an Atlantic liner, sick for home, making Plymouth at nightfall; and at another diving into a little rocky pool through which the Tyne flows north of Bovey; and again waking stiff with dew to see the dawn coming up over the Royston plain. And continually he seemed to see the set of mouth which he knew for his mother's, and A's face, and inexplicably the face of an old man he had once passed in a Warwickshire village. To his great disgust, the most commonplace sentiments found utterance in him. At the same time he was extraordinarily happy. My friend, who has always, though never very passionately, believed himself a most unusual young man, rose to his feet. Feeling a little frightened and more than a little unwell, for he is a person of quiet mental habits, he wandered down the hill. He kept slowly moving his head, like a man who wishes to dodge a pain. I gather that he was conscious of few definite thoughts till he reached the London train. He kept remembering, unwillingly, a night in carnival time in Munich, when he had seen a clown, a Pierrot, and a Columbine tiptoe delicately round the deserted corner of Theresienstrasse and vanish into the darkness. Then he thought of the lights on the pavement in Trafalgar Square. It seemed to him the most desirable thing in the world to mingle and talk with a great many English people. Also he kept saying to himself, for he felt vaguely jealous of the young men in Germany and France, "Well, if Armageddon's on, I suppose one should be there." Of France, he tells me, he thought little. The French always seemed to him people to be respected, but very remote; more incomprehensible than the Japanese, more even than the Irish. Of Russia, less; she meant nothing to him except a sense of hysteria and vague evil which he had been given by some of her music and literature. He thought often and heavily of Germany, of England all the time. He didn't know whether he was glad or sad. It was a new feeling. End of essay. End of Letters from America, by Rupert Brooke.